Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our latest MaxContact webinar, 10 things you really need to know about AI in the contact center. I'm Brooke Watson, Senior Marketing Executive at MaxContact, and I'll be your host for today. As a business, we've been really immersed in the world of AI and its development, and today we're going to be talking about the real truths behind AI in the contact center industry. As AI has sort of developed, it's opened up a lot of debate around its true impact and what the future holds for AI in the contact center. With so much AI content, it can be difficult to divide sort of fact from fiction. So in this webinar, we aim to cut through a bit of that noise and share some real facts about AI's impact. So today we'll be working down from the top 10 common misbeliefs about AI in the contact center. We'll ask you to decide whether or not you think these statements are true or false, and then we'll ask our panel to shed some light on the truth behind the statements. So we've got two great guests joining us today who I'll let do their own introduction for the webinar. Firstly, we're joined by Garry Gormley.
Hello. Thanks very much, Brooke. Great to be here. Exciting to delve into the murky depths of AI and kind of bust some myths with you. So it should be fun.
Perfect. And we're also joined by Matthew Yates.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Brooke. Good afternoon, Matt Yates. I'm VP of Engineering here at MaxContact. So I'm responsible for the development team that builds our product. And yeah, like Garry, really excited to talk about AI for the next hour. I was at an event in Edinburgh last week, a conversation AI event. So got a few topics of discussion to bring up from there, recent findings and discoveries, and in what is a very fast-moving space. So yeah, looking forward to the next 40, 50 minutes. So.
Great. So we've had a look at sort of a bit of research, both from our own internal research as well as a bit of external studies, where we've pulled together, like I say, the sort of top 10 misconceptions and things that people think about the industry. So what we say, we'll get the first poll up for you guys. And if everyone sort of wants to vote whether or not they think this poll is true or false, we'll obviously share the results for that and pass it over to our panel afterwards. But I think if we can get the poll popped up on the screen. So we had a guest there joining us for a second, but we'll just glance over that one. So the first fact is 74% of people believe AI is unethical. So if everyone wants to share their sort of opinion on that, whether or not they think that's true or false as a statement. So we'll just give a couple of seconds on that one. So yeah, this is sort of like a big topic in the industry at the moment. So we've got 60% of the guests think that's a true statement, and we've got 40% that think that's false. So that's interesting. And actually, I can reveal that that statistic is false. However, a Forbes article from April 2023 reported that 96% of people consider ethical and responsible AI to be important. So it's becoming a bit more of like a buzz topic in the industry that, you know, as the technology is developed, it's something that we really need to address. So passing over to our panel, I think I'll go to Matt first on this one. The topic of ethics is coming up more and more, as I said, in the AI realm. For example, most recently, the emergence of deepfakes and synthesized voices has been a massive topic within the industry. What are your personal opinions on ethics surrounding ethics and the use of that of AI in the contact center?
So I think ethics is really important in the context of AI. It was a big theme at the event I attended last week. Indeed, just last week, the European Parliament released an AI Act. It's about a 370-page document, but it's all about responsible use of AI in Europe. And we're seeing that a lot across the globe now. There's a lot of kind of responsible AI acts being published and frameworks being published, which is really good to see. And fundamental to those is keeping humans at the center of AI. And so, you know, things like making sure that there is that human accountability, you know, that there is the traceability when you're using AI, that, you know, there's good privacy and data governance. And there's a range of other different attributes that people need to take into consideration when they're building AI applications, but also when you're using AI applications as well. And so, yeah, trustworthy AI and ethics is really important. And I think it's a topic we're going to see more of. There was an ISO standard launched just at the very back end of last year that probably passed most people by. But again, we'll start to see more and more discussion of that out in the open over the coming months. How about you, Garry?
Great.
You know what? I think it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because when you cast your mind back, I think it was a few months ago that Sam Altman was in court or some sort of body, Supreme Court body was saying literally, come and regulate us. come and give us some guidance as to how we use AI and how we oversee its evolution. And I think there's a few bits for me. It's defining what actually is ethical AI. And I don't think there is a really clear description around what ethical AI is. I mean, it's great to hear that piece of legislation's come through, Matt, because I think that will give a really clear, I suppose, guidance on what ethical AI is. But I think it's about transparency. I think it's about fairness of how it's used, and I think the privacy piece is the biggest bit for me. And I was having a discussion just the other day around the deep fake example, and actually it's not just deep fake where people are impersonating your physical being. It's actually that deep fake where they can copy your voice, and I think that calls into not calls into question, but I think it means that we need to put more guardrails and more safety nets around things like voice biometrics, because we're using my voice as my password now. And actually, if my voice is my password and someone can emulate my voice, then actually does that call into question some of the rigor that we've got around that? So I think it's almost like two-factor authentication, isn't it? It's to say, right, we've got one, and then we need to have another just to kind of really put some additional constraints and some controls around that. So it'll continue to evolve, and I think it's only right. And I think when we look at all of the technology that we've had over the last few years, we've had to go through the same ethical process with a lot of things. So I think it's the right question to be asking.
Brilliant. Thanks, guys. That's some great insights. I'll move on to our next poll, which should be appearing on the screen shortly. So it can be AI can detect customer emotions correctly during 65% of interactions. So whether or not you think that's true or false. Oh, sorry, that's my bad. I've done the wrong one here. That's skipping on to the next one. So that's a little Easter egg for you guys. But so the one we're dealing with now is only 1 in 10 contact centers can afford to implement AI. So whether or not you think that statement is true or false. So just give a couple of seconds on that one for everyone to get their vote in. And we've got the results for that there. So that's 33% of the audience think that that statement is true, and 67% think that it is false. So actually that is correct, it is false. So a study from Call Center Helper actually stated that 51.8% of contact centers now have a strategy built around AI in 2024. So obviously, again, that's something that contact centers are now seeing as more of a daily thing that they need to start implementing into their strategies. So as we're seeing AI pop up more across the industry, I'll go to Garry first on this one. How accessible do you think it now is for smaller contact centers to implement AI within the business?
You know what? I think they've been doing it for a while to some extent. I mean, we've not seen the scale of change with AI that we've seen probably in the last 12 months, but there's been a lot of how do we automate things? How do we make things easier for the day-to-day agent and day-to-day interactions? And we've seen kind of elements of artificial intelligence start to creeping over the years. So I think it's affordable. I think it's accessible, even more so now with all of the different CCaaS vendors starting to integrate more AI technology into things like their chatbot technology, into their agent assist. It's becoming more of an affordable option to integrate into your contact center. I think it very much decides on who's got the right strategy for it and what you want AI to do for you as a business, whether or not you kind of take it to its grassroots and say, right, we just want to do a little bit of auto summarization so that we can create some efficiencies in our post wrap time and AHT. That's one thing. But then actually really deciding whether or not you want to scale that and have voice bots and voice bots kind of answering your calls for you, and more advanced levels of chatbot technology and more AI throughout the whole of the customer journey. I think that's probably where the aspirations of smaller contact centers maybe are a little bit limited more about budget, but I think it is becoming more accessible and more affordable as it becomes more commonplace. I mean, Matt, you'll know more from some of the customer conversations that you're having about tech.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you touched on, a few of the use cases there, and I think, I hope that in 2024 now that, every contact center out there is thinking about their strategy around AI. Obviously, the stats would back that up. But certainly, even if you've not yet invested in AI solutions, you're at least improving your awareness and educating yourself around what's possible. Because there's different levels of AI application. There's the post-call application. There's the application of AI in the IVR system at the point of entry into a contact center. There's chatbot implementation. There's many different implementations, and I think as people in contact centers, the decision makers in contact centers think about their strategy, they've really got to think about the return on investment and understand where the pain points and opportunities are in their customer journey life cycle in the contact center, and think about what technologies are most suitable. And obviously, once you've identified those opportunities and problems, you can then start to identify the suitable vendors and solutions that are out there. And again, I think as it becomes more real in 2024, last year we saw quite a lot of hype around AI. And when you scratched under the surface, there probably wasn't the depth of solution that was being talked about last year. I think we're starting to see those real solutions come to fruition this year. And I think if you can get the strategy right and evaluate the options effectively, not just kind of jump in with the first vendor that comes along, but look at 2-3 different vendors, evaluate them during a proof of concept, a demo, etc., then you're likely to make those advances and improvements to CSAT scores, to conversion rates, to agent well-being and satisfaction, etc., through making good choices as you consider how to actually implement AI in the contact center. But yeah, demonstrating the ROI for me is the fundamental. You need to be able to demonstrate how it's going to positively impact your organization.
I'd agree with that.
Great. Thanks both. That's actually something that we'll go on to cover a little bit later in the webinar. So yeah, that's a great point, Matt. Thank you. And Garry. So I'll go on now to the next poll that I actually let leak slightly a minute ago. So we'll get that one up. So AI can detect customer emotions during 65% of interactions. So whether or not you think that that is true or false, we've got the poll on the screen now. So if everyone wants to vote on that one, then we'll pass it over to our panelists. So I'll just give that one a few seconds. And we've got 71% of the audience think that is true and 29% of them think that it is false. So yep, that one actually is true. So AI sentiment analysis has been found to have between 55 to 65% accuracy, which actually is not far off the human level of sentiment detection, which sits around 60 to 70%. So Matt, I'll go to you first on this one. What do you think about the potential of AI sentiment in the contact center and sort of where we'll see that in 5 years' time?
Oh, 5 years' time, that's a long way away. But so we'll start with 2024. Yeah, we'll start with this year. So yes, sentiment analysis, human emotion detection is an interesting area of research. And I think about it quite simply as breaking into 2 parts. The first part is the analysis of the actual words that we use in conversations. And we can actually start to detect sentiment and a level of emotion from the words used. But obviously the words, the black and white alone, don't give you the element of human emotion that you get when we're in real world conversations. And so the other part of that then is the audio analysis. From the research I've been looking at, certainly the sentiment analysis through the analysis of the text is more mature than the audio analysis. But I think ultimately where we're going is probably, 2-3 years from now, we'll start to see a combination of the two, providing a really good holistic view of emotion in conversations. Today in 2024, I think a lot of companies are starting with the analysis of the text, using the artificial intelligence large language models to analyze the text and provide a sentiment assessment, typically on a per phrase basis. So you can get the sentiment journey throughout a conversation, which can be really useful from a post-call perspective in terms of QA, identifying calls to QA, for example, or with the real-time use cases where we transcribe real-time, starting to identify where sentiment may be going negative, and you may want to alert the manager or alert another person in the team to come and help with that conversation. But I think going forward, the human emotion through the audio analysis is really exciting, because it can actually get a lot more granular in the level of analysis detected. So I think there's about 17 different human emotions that it can now detect through audio analysis. And so we do that today as humans, don't we? So if we look at, a Twitter article, for example, you're probably reviewing it, Brooke, and yourself, Gary, as to whether it's positive, negative, it makes you feel angry, sad, happy, whatever. That'll probably be different to myself. And this is one of the key challenges with detecting sentiment. It's actually that we are all different as humans. Yes, some examples may be fairly black and white. If somebody's shouting down the phone using profanities, then it's quite obvious that they're angry. But there are other more nuanced options. For example, as humans, we use sarcasm. So I could say something really positive, but actually, when you analyse my tone of voice, I'm actually being really sarcastic and really negative. Not that I would ever do that, of course, but that's some of the challenges that artificial intelligence has with really understanding human interaction from an emotion and a sentiment point of view. And I could talk about this topic for ages because it is one quite close to my heart that I find fascinating. But I'll hand over to Gary to see what he thinks.
You know what? I get really excited when we start talking about speech analytics and what you can start to do with it, because I think it's been around for a long time, but I think we've only really started to since AI's evolved and started to use it in a more nuanced way. And I think there's two aspects that I look, and I think there's sentiment when you look at it from a customer perspective, and that's sometimes easier to kind of find than others in terms of the stuff that Matt was talking about there around the words, the language, the phrases that they're saying. But I think there's also something to think about in terms of the agent sentiment as well, and how we start to identify whether an agent is maybe feeling a little bit more vulnerable, whether they're feeling a little bit more unsupported or confused in the information that they're giving to the customer. And I think that's the bit that I think AI and sentiment analysis can really start to help contact centers, especially those perhaps in more of the regulated environment, is identifying that area of confusion on a call where a customer is asking questions around, can you repeat? Do you mind just kind of slowing that down? Or what does that mean? And kind of really starting to think about all the language that's used when we're starting to present either product or information, so that overall cognitive load that the customer's having to deal with and the agent is having to deal with is lessened, because we're able to kind of pick up on triggers and pick up on maybe little nudges that can kind of guide you and point you in the right direction. So I think there's an aspect there around understanding what the customer wants and what the customer needs more, and then building out models and building out phraseology and identifying intonation and pitches that are going to help improve that kind of speech analysis. But I think there's also the flip side is, how do we use it to support agents to have better conversations at the same time?
Yeah, I think especially when you put it in perspective of when you talk about the human level, as you touched on, Matt, with the human level of sentiment detection, you realize then how impressive that technology really is, that you've got a computer that can pretty much hit the mark as to the same that humans can. So it's a very interesting area. So yeah, I'll move on to our next poll. So I'll get that one up on the screen for everyone to vote on. So we've got 14.2% of people have never interacted with a chatbot. So again, if you think that's true or false, the poll should be on the screen now for everyone. Just give that one a few seconds for everyone to get their votes in. And we've got 76% of the audience think that is true and 24% think that it is false. So the majority of rules, it is actually a true statement. So a study conducted by UserLike found that 80.2% of customers said they have interacted with a chatbot, 14.2% have never, and 5.5% said that they couldn't remember. So I'll go to Gary first on this one. Overall, I think that's a high percentage of people who have interacted with a chatbot at some point. What do you think about the impact of chatbots on customer experience and the contact center as a whole?
You know what? I've just had a terrible experience with a chatbot today.
Brilliant.
So, you know, I think the crux of it comes in the design. It's never about the interaction for me. I mean, it is about the interaction, but it's all the way back, right back to the start, saying, right, what's the purpose of what we're trying to do here? What are we trying to solve for? What's the flow and what's the the kind of, I suppose, the common customer questions that are being asked that we can program into a chatbot to have more self-serve options and kind of take and deflect maybe some of that demand away from some of the agents so that they can spend time dealing with queries that really matter and that are a little bit more complex. So that stat doesn't necessarily surprise me. I think the key bit for me is kind of going right back to the drawing board and saying, right, when we're building it out, let's spend some time on the design. Let's spend some time working through the workflow, the data that underpins it, using speech analytics to identify some of your standard contact reasons, and then saying, right, these are the things that we're trying to answer, and this is the way that those things have been answered, which will then give you more of, I suppose, more fluid language around how you want the chatbot to respond. And some of the kind of the relationship that the chatbot then has with a customer. So it's all about going back to the start point and saying, right, how are we going to build it, and how do we make sure we test it rigorously and set up the right guardrails so that it functions and it functions well. But Matt, you'll have a view, no doubt, and might be similar.
No, I do have a similar view. I think, yeah, it's important to really think hard about what use cases you want to truly solve the problems with a chatbot for. And some are too complex. I've like you, I've had similar experiences in the last week or so where I actually really enjoy interacting with chatbots because I enjoy kind of, just seeing if they can actually solve a problem. Oh, not trying to catch them out or hack them or anything like that, but just actually see if they can solve the problem that I'm engaging with them about. And I'd say that right now, a minority can. The majority typically can't. They're a bit of a kind of almost like a holding pattern before you can actually get through to a real agent. Yeah. And so for me, I think it comes back to, like you said, that conversation design aspect, really understanding what the nature of the problems and the call drivers are. Why are people using my chatbot? What type of problems are they calling in about that they need help with? And trying to automate those simple tasks. But the more complex ones, don't frustrate the user. Really think about that conversation interaction, because that's your front door for your company, where people like myself, like Garry and others are interacting with your company directly. And like any experience, that first 30 seconds, first minute experience is really important to providing me with a positive or a neutral or negative experience. And so the conversation design is really important. And I think where we started to see it get a little bit more interesting is where companies are starting to integrate generative AI into their chatbots. So some of the conversation designers I was speaking to last week up in Edinburgh, they're talking about their roles evolving, and they haven't actually been much more aware of the capabilities of generative AI and large language models and incorporating those in. And so I think that's where we'll see it evolve to over the coming years. But again, back to the conversation we had 10 minutes ago, it's got to be done responsibly. There'd be nothing worse than a chatbot using Gen AI presenting me with a response that was completely off topic and just plain wrong. I'm just going to lose all confidence in trusting that company. And those are some of the issues that we're seeing out in the real world right now, right? With the Air Canada issue of late, we're starting to see that where companies have rushed to implement ChatGPT style solutions without having the guardrails in place to ensure a consistent and excellent customer experience.
And it has a knock-on impact in terms of the agent as well, because you start to go through this cycle of poor chatbot experience, and you get onto a contact center agent, and all of a sudden, and immediately you're hacked off as a customer. So you're going into that conversation in a heightened state that the agent has to then unpick. So I think it's double impact on your brand and double impact on the customer satisfaction, customer experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks both. That's some great points. I'll move on actually, because we're talking about ROI briefly. So that'll bring us to the next poll that we'll get on the screen now for everybody. So yeah, we've got 4 out of 5 contact centers struggle to find ROI when implementing AI. So whether or not you think that's true or false. I know we touched briefly on ROI in one of the other topics, so it's a good time to bring this one in. So yeah, if you think that's true or false, I'll give it a couple of seconds and then we'll get the results up for that one. Perfect. So we've got 42% think it's true and 58% think it's false. So majority wins on yeah, majority wins on that one again slightly. So that is in fact a false statistic. So according to the Gartner Generative AI 2024 Planning Survey, it's a long mouthful, we've got of 822 business leaders, on average, respondents report that 15.8% revenue increase, 15.2% cost savings, and 22.6% of overall productivity boost with AI. So that's all a big mouthful there, but we'll go to the panel. So where do you think are some of the key areas leaders can see ROI with AI in the contact center? I'll go to Matt first on this one.
Okay, thanks, Brooke. So there are several, and I think back to a few minutes ago, I was saying, you know, understand your contact center, understand how AI could help, and then start to evaluate where best to use AI. Where is it going to give you the biggest initial return on investment? Start there and build from there. And what we're seeing across a lot of our clients is, you know, it's fairly traditional, is actually using speech analytics to analyze 100% of calls rather than the classic, you know, 1 to maybe 5% of calls that we listen to historically for training and monitoring purposes. We can now analyze 100% of calls. From a QA perspective and from a compliance perspective, really important to a lot of our clients, they can then demonstrate compliance with far greater confidence across all their interactions and conversations. But that might not be the biggest ROI to another contact center. An outbound contact center, for example, may be really interested in increasing their conversion rates, trying to find those insights in those conversations that can help drive an improvement in conversion rates, whether that's things like, in a sales conversation, objection handling. So identifying, you know, the behaviors of my really high performing agents and how they effectively handle the objections from the customer and turn that into a positive outcome for the call. Some customers may go, you know what, if I can increase my conversion rates by 1-2% using AI, let's do it. You know, that's going to be massive for my business, more so than the auto QA part of it. So I think it varies across industry and it varies across the use case as well. I don't know what you're seeing, Gary, in your conversations.
You know what? It's interesting you talk about the sales aspect and the service aspect, because when we think about AI, I think we immediately go to the service end of the spectrum, don't we? We immediately think about how can we generate efficiency in AHT by maybe introducing auto summarization. How can we introduce service handoffs and maybe auto intent so that we can get emails being written for us, and then we just push click and go, and then that gets sent out through automation and such. But I think there is a real application of AI in the sales space, thinking more so about how we start to suppose account manage, how we start to service, how we create that sense of loyalty in customer conversations, and how we start to, I suppose, use AI as a tool to kind of strengthen some of the conversations within sales, within account management, within negotiation, and providing access to prompts and nudges and knowledge management that might help kind of surface little prompts that might help improve conversion, or might help give you a nudge to say, try and say this from a retention perspective so that you win and you retain more customers. So I think there's loads of opportunity to pull out ROI from the use of AI. But I think it goes back to the original point that we talked about earlier, say, right, do you understand what AI can and can't do? And do you understand where you want to deploy AI across that customer journey? Right from the marketing step is to say, right, how do we use AI to nurture a lead and create sales cadences that are going to kind of give you that that kind of, I suppose, boost into an actual sales prospect conversation, all the way through to the service spectrum, all the way through to using the product and claiming or using the interaction for what it's intended for, and then right through to the customer renewal side of things. So I think it's working that customer journey and then saying, right, what's available and how do we start to weave it into some of our processes?
Great, thank you. I think to put it on the flip side, the next poll, we'll go back to talking about it from the agent perspective. So if we get the next poll on the screen any second now, the classic one talking about AI will replace 60% of contact center agents. And I know that's a topic that comes up quite a lot, but it's, you know, an important one. And I think the impact of AI on agents will always be an important conversation that, you know, we need to have. So whether or not you think that statement is true or false. So I'll leave it on the screen for a couple of seconds, then we can sort of dive into that one. So we've got 33% think it's true and 67% think that it is false. I think everyone on this call is very good at predicting the results of these polls, so the majority wins again. It is in fact a false study. So we've actually got a study by Service Desk Institute that highlighted that AI cannot fully replace agents, that they'll always need the human element of our contact centers. The study actually stated that AI is predicted to help boost agent performance by 40% by 2035. So I think I'll go to Garry first on this one. So what do you think? I know you've touched on the well-being angle of the impact on agents, but what do you think? How do you think the AI will impact agents in the contact center? Will it be a help to them or more of a hindrance? What do you think we'll see in that area?
You know what? It's I'm with the poll, so I don't think it will replace them. I think it will significantly change how they interact with the customer. And how they work. And I think we'll probably need to think about the different skill sets that we're going to need for people in the contact center, and how technology evolves mean that the skills and the capability of people might need to evolve with it. But I think it's all about how AI and humans can harmonize together, and how we use AI to kind of help, I suppose, remove some of the mundane and the routine tasks, so that the agent can really focus on some of the complex issues. I think it's really important to say how AI can start to help improve agent access to information. And I think that's where it's going to be more game changing, is to say, right, we can use agent assist in much more structured ways. We can use more access to knowledge management, and especially in that remote aspect or that hybrid world where people aren't as easily connected, I think it's going to have some real good application in providing them the tools to be able to do their job much quicker, so that they can speed up those interactions, which ultimately means they get more adept at dealing with things and their speed to competency improves, which goes back to the last question that we talked about in terms of that ROI piece. If we can get people firing on all cylinders quicker, we're going to get a greater level of productivity from people. So I think it's about agent assist as the key bit. I think it's about helping them do more of the, or spend more time on the complex, so they're not have to get bogged down in the more simplistic stuff. And then I think it's about enabling them to have more breadth of opportunity, which AI will bring in terms of their role and their in-role development. So those are my thoughts.
Matt?
Yeah, no, thanks, Garry. Yeah, I think we all need to learn to live with AI. I think that for me is the bottom line. It's not going away. We're just going to see more and more AI over the coming years, and so as humans, we need to find a way to live harmoniously with it, if I can put it that way. And I think in the contact center in particular, I think it is about augmenting that agent experience. And actually, you know, one thing that computers can't do, and AI certainly can't do, is they don't have that human touch. You know, they don't have emotions. You know, you imagine dealing with a well, yeah, you say yeah, but you imagine dealing with you know, kind of a very emotional situation, a vulnerable situation. There's nothing better than a well-versed human to deal with that interaction. You know, to do it with empathy, with feeling. So you say, yeah, maybe, you know, 10, 20 years time, they will be able to effectively. But right now, certainly, I think, you know, there's no substitute for humans and the human interaction and the quality of engagement that we can provide, whether that's in a customer service environment or, you know, an outbound environment. And I think the complexity as well, I think a lot of the tasks that we get AI to do today are very kind of specific one-to-one tasks. They are super powerful. There's no denying that at all, of course. But I think, you know, the complex problem solving that a lot of contact center agents have to deal with today, dealing with multiple problems per interaction, that does pose some challenges for AI. And I think then coming back to it, I think the ethical part of it as well, you know, AI, if it's not done responsibly, you know, can be biased, as can humans, of course. So, you know, I think that training in the contact center, I saw a really cool demo last week, actually, which I'll just share. in the contact center environment, this one vendor had actually created a chatbot which they were using internally, and they'd actually fed the artificial intelligence model with all their internal training data and created some training personas. And so as a new agent, freshly joining the company in my first week, yes, I go through the standard training, but I've also got access to this chatbot that will, when I'm not fielding calls, actually kind of almost test and help me improve how I respond to certain types of queries. So it would ask me, you know, I've got Gary calling up, he's calling about this problem, how would you respond? And with it being generative AI based, it can follow a natural conversation flow, and it's been fine-tuned to be that trainer within that specific domain. And I thought that was kind of a neat use case. But back to your point, Gary, about, you know, how can we upskill agents fast to leverage this technology to ultimately provide either a great customer service or a great outbound service as well.
And you know what? I think I'd just build on that for a second, Matt, because I think there's no better use case for a chatbot than your own internal team saying, our internal chatbot is awesome because it answers all the questions. It helps me field all the things that a customer's asking, because guess what? Your agents are asking the questions that the customers are asking them. So if you can really kind of create a great test case and a solid knowledge base internally, then you can flip that out externally to customers, and it can be game changing in terms of the level of quality of response that you get. I suppose you have to kind of have those guardrails internally that what you're saying internally is right, but I think it can make a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Again,
absolutely.
just to touch on that one again. So just to elaborate on that example a
Brooks,
little
like,
bit more.
move them on.
No, sorry, but just very quick,
Not at
very
all,
quick
take
one.
your time.
Yeah, so that chatbot example, where it was really interesting was this particular client that we're speaking to. You know, their use case was the agents only had one screen, and so they were obviously dealing with the interaction through that screen, and they were being asked questions that they didn't have the knowledge to hand about, and they were using their mobile phones to Google their own knowledge base to try and get the responses. So imagine, you know, if they had a chatbot in line, providing with real-time suggestions, much faster. So yeah, really interesting.
Yeah. Great, that's some great points from you both. I think as well, now that we work in a hybrid world too, that's really important, where we don't have someone maybe sat beside us all day, especially when we join a new company, to be able to have that sort of AI assistant maybe to get us up to speed when we're working hybrid. So yeah, that's some great points from you both. I'm going to move on to the next poll now. We've actually had somebody part of our Q&A just write in about this topic, so it's perfect timing. So we've got AI can help cut compliance costs by 10%, whether or not you think that statement is true or false. But yeah, it's a big topic in the industry about sort of compliance and how contact centers navigate that going forward with AI. So I'll just give everyone a couple of seconds to vote on that poll, and then we'll dive into that topic. So we've got 85% think that is true and 15% think that it is false. So yeah, that is actually true. A study in June 2023 found that AI was already helping 36% of tightly regulated industries, such as finance, cut compliant costs by 10%. So I've got a bit of a two-part question for you both, and I'll let you decide who wants to take this one first. So with evolving compliance regulations in the contact center, how do you think AI can help ensure contact centers remain compliant? And what are your thoughts on compliance and regulation around AI itself as the technology develops?
Ooh, I'll give a short answer and then hand over to Gary. So my short answer, my short answer is, I think a couple of examples we see are, from a compliance perspective, you know, script adherence and compliance statements and vulnerability detection. So those three are areas that we see quite a lot across our client base, and certainly AI can help with those, because it can help you identify, in theory, 100% of examples of those across all your interactions and calls, which in turn, obviously, you know, helps improve your risk posture in your organization. I won't get into that, the cost side of it. I'll leave that for Gary to elaborate if he feels the need to.
You know what? I've got two words, and it's consumer duty. I think that's the biggest for a lot of customers that I speak to, and a lot of them, to be fair, are in the financial services sector. So it's obviously it's a very hot topic. But I think consumer duty is probably the biggest area, I think, where AI can help support contact centers deliver on the requirements of that piece of legislation from the FCA. I don't know whether you call it legislation, more regulation than legislation. And I think there's a few bits with that. I think there's I mean, Matt's already talked about some of the stuff around quality when we're talking about the framework of that conversation. I think there's lots of stuff that sits in ICOBs around misleading statements, advice, misadvice, whether you're giving selective presentation, all of that stuff leads to massive fines from the FCA. And I think I was on the FCA website the other day, and I think for 2024 alone, they've already had £54 million worth of fines issued to contact centres. And I think when you look at previous years, there's some huge fines. So I think the compliance appetite for AI is huge, and often it's linked back to, right, how do I scan more of my calls? So typically we might do what, 2 to 3% of QA calls are marked and scored, whereas actually Matt already referred to it. Say, right, we can get 100% coverage, and actually we can identify the exceptions and the triggers that are going to say, right, we heard the word recommend there, and we're non-advised, so we can't advise in a non-advised call. So we should go and check that out. And actually what we can do is we can build a redress strategy, and we can build a closed loop feedback strategy that says, right, we heard this on this call, we'd like to kind of put it right. And that kind of breaks down all the post-call barriers, the breaches that you're going to see. So I think there's bags of stuff that AI can certainly help in the financial space, but I think it also just helps with general things like script adherence, quality monitoring, and next best action that can improve opportunities for upsell, cross-sell, guidance on certain things. So bags of stuff. I get quite excited about this bit because I think there's a massive area of opportunity for businesses to do more.
Definitely. I think just quickly as well, what are your sort of opinions on the compliance? Obviously talking about how we can use AI to make our contact centers more compliant, but what do you think about the compliance around AI itself? I know there's a lot of debate about, whether or not we're going to have opt-in for AI in the future and things like that. Do you have any opinions on what we can sort of see in that field?
You know what, it goes back to that piece around ethical AI, isn't it? And it's saying, right, are we being overt as to how we're using it? And are we communicating that to customers? So I think privacy policies will probably need to be updated just to let people know that how we're using their data and what type of AI we're using. But I think Matt's probably better placed to answer that from some of the kind of stuff that you do in that end. But I think certainly it's going to impact how overt we need to be, and we need to be probably telling customers how we're using that data and whether they're dealing with a person or not a person.
Yeah, no, certainly your last point, I agree with Gary. I think in terms of organizations that are building AI-powered applications, there will be compliance. We're already starting to see some standards come out. I think we'll start to see those really solidify. And then you're having to, satisfy auditors to make sure that, you are building AI applications in a compliance, an ethical way, in a responsible way. And I think also it may extend to the actual consumers of those applications as well, because particularly with generative AI, there may be a scenario in a couple of years' time where in a contact center, you may have some of your staff, reskill to be the ones that actually do almost like a human review of the AI outputs to make sure that, they are providing the quality of outputs that represent your company to the best degree. So I think there's an element of actually, both vendors and consumers may well actually find themselves needing to demonstrate compliance to certain frameworks going forward.
Yeah.
Great, thanks both. I'll move on to our next poll because I'm aware of the time. So if we get that one on the screen for everybody. So we've got AI can help to automate 84% of contact center interactions. So whether or not you think that's true or false. Again, I'll leave it up on the screen for a couple of seconds for everyone. And we've got, an even split. So we've got 50-50 actually. perfectly down the middle. So I can reveal that 50% of you were correct. It is false. So a study by Zendesk suggested that around 40% of customer interactions can be handled by AI. So it's a common misconception in the industry that AI is like a silver bullet for all contact center challenges and interactions. But obviously that study shows that there are only a number of percentages of interactions that can actually be handled by AI. So how important do you think it is to find the sort of balance between AI and the human touch in contact centers? What are your personal opinions around that? I'll go to Garry first on this one.
You know what? I would love to see that poll by Zendesk done again, because I think it's probably higher in the last maybe 6 to 12 months. If that's a 2023 start, late 2023, it could actually be changed, and I think it might actually be a lot higher now. And what I've seen in some AI tech now is to say as chatbots and as AI is deployed across the contact center, you can start to see the chatbot becoming more intelligent. And there's models now where you can kind of say where it gets to a point where actually it goes, whether it's a brain or whether it's something that kind of it'll turn green. So actually we can deal with more of your queries now. We are almost becoming self-sufficient. And I think that I suppose that the balance needs to be around Matt's point earlier, so how do we harmonize the human interaction with the AI interaction? And I think we're finding that as we go. I think because it's evolving so fast, we're having to think differently and we're having to think fast about how we balance that and how we're harmonizing it. I think the key discussion point for me needs to be about how do we handle the human element with the agents and with the insights that they've got to do the job and to manage and to handle that customer interaction in a way that's empathetic and demonstrates the customer service aspect outside of AI. And that's the bit for me where we need to kind of say, actually, right, how do we balance that? So whether it's an empathetic conversation, will a chatbot or AI ever be at the point, even if it's a voice bot, will they ever be at the point where they can demonstrate empathy to a customer? I'm not entirely convinced just yet. Maybe give it time as we start to evolve sentiment analysis and integrate that with text to speech. It might get there, but I think that's where humans will rule the roost in their ability to handle emotions more effectively than perhaps AI can.
Yeah, just very quickly on that one, Garry. I think I'd encourage everybody to think hard about which interactions they want to have AI handle and which ones are best left to humans. I think recently in the news there was the Klarna example where they've automated, I think around about 2 million plus conversations. About 2/3 of their customer service chats are now fully automated using AI.
Yeah.
That's obviously a decision that they're taking, and good luck to them. The press would certainly suggest it's been very successful for them. But think about another use case. For example, if I want to phone up and cancel my Sky subscription, and because I no longer need it for the summer, that conversation, if I'm Sky or if I'm a representative I'm working on behalf of Sky, I probably don't want to offload that to an AI chatbot, because I'd prefer to have a human have a conversation with me to understand, well, why do I want to cancel my Sky subscription? Would I maybe be interested in an offer to tie me over the summer months, for example? There's more nuanced opportunities there, and effectively fundamentally the cost of actually finding new clients and new customers is very, very high. It's often kind of 5x the cost of losing them. And so, you don't want to lose customers lightly. So in that scenario, I'd absolutely want a human dealing with my question and my interaction. So I think it varies across customers, across the client base, across the nature of the problems. I think it comes down to customers' own judgment.
Yeah, I think it also it's the backdrop to which you're working in as well. So I know, for example, AI is brilliant in identifying aspects of customer vulnerability, but actually you need a human then to have that interaction with somebody to kind of understand what to do with that vulnerability. So I think it depends very much on the type of call, the type of interaction, exactly to your point, Matt, because AI can only take it so far before a customer has to, or before an agent has to intervene to kind of demonstrate some sort of empathetic approach. And until AI can do that and do that well in a proven environment, I think there is a very, very real need for humans to stay in the loop.
Great. I think now is actually a good time. We've had a question from the audience as well, sort of linked to chatbots. And I don't know if you guys are aware of it yet, but HMRC has announced that they'll be closing their helpline for half the year, and people seeking help with their tax returns will be forced to sort of interact with a chatbot instead of being able to get through to sort of a live person. So the audience has asked, what are your sort of thoughts on this, and what do you think the repercussions of that will be on the customers' sort of HMRC?
I knew Keith Stapleton would ask a doozy. I mean, if anybody's actually ever rang up the HMRC, you probably welcome the more evolved use of a chatbot rather than actually waiting on the line for about an hour to 2 hours to speak to them. So I think it was only a matter of time, I think, before they went down this route, because obviously they've got a sizable knowledge base, which I think customers, I mean, I know there's a knowledge base there. I don't really use it because I'd rather speak to somebody. So I think you're forcing the agenda a little bit, and kind of forcing some of those behaviors to some of the things that you'd like to speak to somebody about versus you need to use a chatbot with it. I think the biggest challenge that the HMRC are going to have is all of the things that we've talked about historically here, is that the complexity of some of the calls that they're getting in just can't be handled by a chatbot, or a chatbot may struggle to handle it. So they're going to need to think of something, I suppose, as an escalation process that's going to meet the needs of those customers, because you can't just carte blanche say, we're not having you access to anybody. So there needs to be either some sort of handoff to say, right, we can't answer you, we'll do a proactive outbound call to support you, rather than just closing the doors. So it'd be interesting to understand how they're going to deploy that in the months where they're saying that they're not open for inbound traffic. Matt, what's your thoughts?
No, it's very interesting that I haven't actually seen that, but I think, I'd imagine that they have got a huge amount of knowledge that they built up over the years, and they've got a good insight into the types of inquiries that they're receiving, and I would hope that they've actually run a number of in-depth experiments to evaluate the effectiveness of the chatbot in answering queries. And and if that chatbot is successfully satisfying 70-80% of queries, and they're getting positive customer feedback on those outcomes, then that probably does point towards that being a pragmatic decision. Now, shutting completely closing off the door to contacting them directly via the phone for speaking to a person, now that is potentially a bit more challenging, so I'd have to dig into that to see whether that is actually the case or not. But certainly as a fundamental kind of idea, it could make sense, and I would like to trust that the government has done the research and has reached this conclusion responsibly, shall we say.
You know what, at the same time though, I was at a webinar, an expo a couple of years ago, and I was speaking to the guys at Gymshark, and they were like, we don't have inbound operators, we don't have inbound traffic, and I know it's a very different, one's retail, one's a government website, but there is an argument to say, if you get your chatbot and your ticket management process right, and you might not necessarily need to have as big an inbound function, but I think your point's spot on, Matt, is that they need to have got the infrastructure right to support 70-80% of that demand. Otherwise, customers, especially customers that are ringing about such sensitive issues around pay and money, will raise the roof.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you both for that one. So we'll move on to our last poll of the day. So get that one up on the screen for everybody. So we've got 21% of contact center leaders say that AI is already helping them create a better customer experience. So the final vote of the day, get your votes in. I'll leave that on the screen for a couple of seconds for everyone. And we've got 94% think that it is true and 6% think that it is false. And I can confirm that it is true. It was actually from our own internal research. And October 2023 industry report that we did confirmed that AI, even at its early stages in the contact center, is already proven CX. So I can share that research with everyone post-webinar as well if you'd like to take a look at it for yourself. But I'll pass this over to Matt first. So for contact centers looking to boost their CX, where would you recommend that they start with AI?
I would say start by understanding the problems and opportunities, and identify where AI can best help. And across our client base, one area that we see is the quality assurance and the compliance, because it's quite a very tangible ROI. It's one that is very easy to understand the benefits of using artificial intelligence to analyze 100% of calls rather than just 2-3% of calls that are manually listened to and analyzed today. And from that starting point, you can then start to explore other opportunities. So I think rather than kind of jump straight to like a real-time use case, I would anticipate that, you know, starting simpler with a more tangible ROI in the area of QA and compliance is as good a place to start as any. Great,
thanks. Garry, what's your thoughts on the topic?
You know, I'm conflicted with this because some of the other statistics that are out there show that customer experience or customer satisfaction is really starting to drop. And if you look at the UK CSI results, they're showing that 76% is where customer satisfaction is at the moment. And there was another stat, it might have been the UK Customer Service Institute again, that was saying 35% of customers say a positive use of technology by an organisation has led them to use that again, but 45% say poor use of technology has made them avoid that organisation again. So I think it's getting that customer experience right that's the key piece in this. And I think for me, all of the stuff that we've talked about today is about what is the purpose of what you're trying to use AI for? What is the use case that you're trying to solve for? What's the data that underpins all that? How do you access the right data to create the right journey? And then how do you build out all those workflows so that it flows in the right way and you test it rigorously and you evolve it? And I think if everybody has that right approach and they don't kind of try and cut corners and push things out that aren't necessarily ready, or we're more overt with say, right, I'm a chatbot, I can only answer these 5 types of questions at the moment, but I will be evolving. Great. I know if I've got 5 things, I can deal with that. Otherwise, I need to speak to an agent. So I think it's about signposting. It's about understanding the journeys that you're trying to fix and kind of saying, right, let's take one journey at a time and iterate. What's the phrase Mark Twain says? It's it escapes me. It's like continuous improvement is better than delayed perfection. And I think that's the approach that we can take with AI, is to say, right, how do we evolve it? But how do we make sure customers are aware we are in an evolving state? A bit like the baristas in Costa. They say trainee barista on the back of them. So you give them a little bit more time.
Perfect. Great, thanks. So I'm aware that we are 2 minutes till 3 o'clock now. So I'll just close everything up for us today. But I think I've had the privilege of listening to quite a lot of our webinar guests on the topic of AI. And I think one thing that really stands out to me is that, you know, AI is really this exciting thing, and it is going to revolutionize a lot of the things that we do in the contact center. But one of the overarching things is really that we're doing it with sort of mindful implementation. And I think that's, you know, one of the key things that you to really consider, you know, what's right for your contact center. And it's just a very interesting topic, I think, anyway. So yeah, to wrap up today's session, obviously, of course, I'd like to thank our guests for joining us today for the discussion, and also everyone that joined the webinar today and contributed to our polls. I'll share the research that we've mentioned in the webinar today, as well as the on-demand link for everyone, so you can watch the webinar back at any time. So, and if there's any questions, of course, for the email that we send out, then please get in touch, any feedback or questions off the back of the webinar. So perfect. Thank you, everyone, for joining today.
Thanks for hosting, Brooke.
Thank you all.
Cheers.
Thanks for hosting, Brooke. Cheers, Garry.
Thanks, Pep.
Speak to you.